Some people, Anne, Emily, Gail. Hello, everyone. If you want to let us know where you're tuning in from, that'd be great. Henry's in New York. Josh is in the UK. And I am not at the museum today, but I am close by. Um, yes, I'm also in West Hartford. Actually at home because I'm starting to get a cold and I didn't want to get all my office mates sick. All right. Anyone else want to tell us where you're tuning in from or what brought you here? What is your experience with therapists?
Oh, that's juicy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh-oh.
I'll start off. Mine has been overwhelmingly positive.
That's always nice to hear.
I've had the same therapist for 9 years, I think, and she
Oh,
is
wow.
amazing.
Wow.
Great.
I love her very much. She even got so in the US there are different um you get different things for each state. So when I moved from the state of Massachusetts to Connecticut, my therapist got a different license for Connecticut so we can state
Wow, that's beautiful commitment.
yes.
Yeah, I
I did
forget in
not
the US you
expect
have to
that,
be
but
yeah, I forget in the
yeah.
US you have to be licensed in that certain state.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think New York is very difficult. So if I ever move to New York, I think that'd be the end of the relationship. But um, awesome, Bristol, welcome. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Hi, I'm Omar Acevedo, and I'm the literary program coordinator at the Mark Twain House Museum in Hartford, Connecticut. Thank you for joining us for this virtual program for And How Does That Make You Feel? Everything you ever or never wanted to know about therapy. Virtual programs like this are produced in part with support honoring the late Frank Lord. We are grateful to honor his memory with these programs. And we also want to thank our members. I know there are at least a few of you here. If you're not a member, please consider supporting our museum by becoming a member. There are so many benefits to becoming a member. You will receive free or discounted admission to our author programs, the house and museum, year-round discounts in the store and cafe, and much more. You can visit our website for more information or contact me, and I will send you to the right folks. Now on to our guests. Joshua Fletcher, better known as Anxiety Josh, I'm Anxiety Omar, is a leading UK-based psychotherapist specializing in anxiety and the host of the podcasts Disordered and the Panic Pod. After being diagnosed with and overcoming severe anxiety himself, Joshua now uses his profession and platform to educate others about mental health. Our moderator, Henry Alford, is a journalist and humorist who is the author of 6 books, including How to Live and Big Kiss, which won a Thurber Prize for American Humor Award. He writes for The New Yorker. During this event, we encourage you to have a conversation with each other in the chat. If you have a specific question, please post that into our Q&A section. That's on the bottom left of the screen. You'll see 2 word bubbles and Q&A underneath that. So that is all from me for now. I might be back later. We'll see. So please sit back and enjoy this conversation. And I'll turn this over to Josh and Henry.
Thanks, Omar. Omar has disappeared from our lives briefly. Well, Josh, I'm going to hold up your book like this so we can all see it. Yay!
Yeah.
Josh has written a terrific, very funny, very confessional, very sensitive and thoughtful book. I realize it's maybe the faintest form of praise to tell a creative person, "You're so brave." But I want to say to you, you're so brave without having the stink of me offering faint praise. I truly admire the courage that you've displayed in writing this book. You really put yourself on the line. I should explain to people that what the book is it's case studies of 5 or 6 of Josh's patients, with very granular observations and reporting. And then Josh has chosen to give his responses by breaking his own psyche up into 8 or 9 categories: the critic, the skeptic, the irreverence. And so we hear a lot from Josh, and I think that's a good place to start. Is, do you want to talk a little bit about that decision, Josh, of putting yourself so centrally in the book?
Yeah. And thanks for having me on, and it's lovely to meet you, Henry. I wrote this book because I wanted a book about mental health to be accessed by everyone. I think someone who works a lot in the wellness sphere, particularly online using social media, or being a therapist and talking to other therapists, and my whole world is being a therapist in this room. We often hear these conversations about like, we need to talk about mental health and we should talk more and stuff like that, which is great. But I often found in my experience that a lot of people don't know how. How do we talk about that? So I wanted to write a book that was engaging, confessional, behind the scenes of and modeling kind of an authenticity. You know, often therapists, you know, people go to see a therapist and are expected to show vulnerabilities, to show parts of themselves that perhaps they wouldn't show to many people. And I thought I'd practice what I preach and write a book where I show my own vulnerabilities, using lots of humor as well. You know, I want it to be accessible. I want it to be an enjoyable read for people. But also, hey, listen, you know, this is why I became a therapist. These are the voices in my head as I'm working with clients. My friends are often horrified. They're like, I wouldn't want to know what my therapist is thinking during a session. And I'm like, well, it might not be as bad as you think. And I thought I'd answer that question too. Yeah, I wanted a book that, okay, if you struggle with anxiety, you'll love this book. Or if you love therapy or looking for a therapist, you'll love this book. Or if you just want to know more about the world of therapy, you'll love this book. But also a book where no matter how you've got there and no matter why you're reading it, you feel a bit more confident talking about stuff. So I write about different types of anxiety, depression, grief, but very sparingly in bite-sized chunks. You know, a lot of people will pick up a mental health book and brace themselves because it can be quite heavy. I've read a lot of them, and I'm a therapist, so I'll enjoy reading them. But I wanted something that was like, I can have bite-sized things where I'm learning without realizing I'm learning. Stealth help, I think they call it. Yeah, and you put the book down and feel a bit more confident talking about therapy. Maybe it's encourages you to seek therapy yourself, and maybe, you know, it gives you more tools to have a conversation with a vulnerable friend or loved one because you feel a bit more confident now. Then I'll be very happy. I think the book's purpose would have been served, and part of doing that was to put my own vulnerability on the line.
Yeah, no, and it's you do it sort of from the get-go. So on page 3, we have a scene where Josh runs into the bathroom at his office and ends up peeing in the sink. So that
Thanks,
I found
Henry.
that totally winning, because as soon as I read that, I thought, oh, I trust this guy. He's really telling the truth, and he really has skin in the game and pee in the sink. And so, yeah, I think it's a really effective technique.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to show people I was human. For context, I'm not just walking around urinating in sinks, but I'm what happens is I'm exploring from the perspective of a therapist I've drank too much coffee before a client session. and someone's talking, and I'm making some really good progress with this client. And then about 10 minutes before the end, I am desperate to use the toilet. So all my internal voices are arguing, shouting at me. The voice of biology is going, your prostate is going to explode. And then my inner critic's going, why did you drink a coffee before this, etc. And how I navigate that in the therapy room, obviously you can take breaks, but on the cusp of something really quite significant with this certain client. So I didn't want to leave. And at the end, I end up running to the toilet. The toilets are engaged, the urinals are being used, and I didn't want to wet myself, so I just there we go. And then I just spoke about that afterwards, about like going back to my office, like, oh gosh, and the shame, the shame, and the kind of also laughing at it that surrounds that. There's loads of bits of being human in the book there, including what's in my therapy drawer. Um, every therapist has a magic drawer, and I let you know what's in mine.
And of course, I mean, the bulk of the book, I should add, are these case studies, which Josh treats. It's almost like an Oliver Sacks book at times, where it's very granular reporting of these people's evolution vis-a-vis their problems. Can you want to talk a little bit, Josh, about what are some of the tensions surrounding writing about your clients?
Yeah, I mean, obviously that was when I had this idea, I had to go through a very rigorous ethical process, seek permission from certain people, particularly the clients, and obviously work very hard to anonymize people, which I feel I have done very well, and the people are very happy with it. There's no identifiable characteristics, and obviously you've got to make it accessible. But had various supervision as well. Confidentiality is the cornerstone of my profession. But I thought this would be a nice way to actually show the world actually what happens behind the therapy room door. A lot of people may put off therapy because they're unsure, the mystery, the uncertainty. What's the therapist like? Is there a horrible power dynamic in there where I'm going to feel small and vulnerable and judged? What I've done using these client case studies is to show that actually there's a lot of compassion and empathy there, a genuine support, an unconditionality that I have for all of my clients, and also kind of modeling what real and hopefully good therapy looks like, particularly for the world of people who are anxious. That's what I specialize in. And yeah, the people that are included in the book are very happy with it, and I am too. And I think it's a good way to do it. It's a question I get asked a lot, particularly by therapists, and it's something that I've spent a lot of time doing, even before pen was to paper, to make sure it was done ethically and properly.
Yeah, no, that all of that comes through. I never felt uncomfortable or like I was reading or sifting through someone's dirty laundry. I guess it made me wonder a little bit about this idea, besides the person who doesn't want to be helped, what's the most difficult kind of patient for you to treat or to work with?
I mean, each human being is complex and has multiple facets of themselves. I don't think there's a particular type. As a therapist, I am trained to be as unconditional and non-judgmental as I can. But there are, I am a human and with a personal life too. I have my own personal philosophies and ideologies and ethical frameworks that I like to see the world through. Sometimes it's challenging when you have clients with prejudices, but again, they're not there for me. I'm there for them, and hopefully, I hold the belief that when someone's happy in themselves, they can make progress. You know, I don't think people should deserve to suffer, particularly with mental health issues. So that's one challenging one. You know, when you get someone who comes in who's like sprouting a lot of things that you personally are a bit like, oh, you know, that kind of grates against me and it's quite jarring. But then as a therapist, and as I convey in the book, you've got the voices in my head going, it's not about you. Remember your training, step into your client's frame of reference. You know, if obviously it goes too far, then I could say, listen, as a therapist, can be like, I just don't think this is a good match. We're not going to work, you know. And I can say that because if my own frame of reference is stepping in too much, then I fail the client. So I've got to be like, right, okay, let's see how it works. And I've had many clients like that, and actually, the beautiful things have happened, and I've learned about myself as well through it, as well as the therapeutic relationship and the process with that client. Yeah, there's a few, and the other one is, I think you touched on it just then, Henry, is that the people that you got to want to go to therapy. I often get lots of people like, can you help my family member, or can you help my loved one or my friend? Uh, and I appreciate that. And I think that's a loving, caring thing to do from that person. But the rule for me is like, it's got to be the person that has to ask and want it. You know, otherwise, you know, you get people in the therapy room that just don't want to be there. No, they're not ready yet. You know, so I'd say that they're kind of two of the most challenging today.
Right. Um, and it's interesting to me that you embrace what to me were slightly unconventional methodologies, like you have the client Zara who's agoraphobic, and at one point you guys do a session in a car. um, or what was the other one I was thinking of? Uh, well, anyway, I guess, well, even this exercise of writing a letter to your anxiety, that's a really interesting, offbeat way to address a problem. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? What's the value of something like that, of writing a letter to your anxiety?
Yeah, sure. So another reason I wrote this book is to teach people that therapy and therapists are trained in different modalities. There are different types. If you imagine a tradesperson, you know, if you had a, I don't know, if you had a leaky pipe at home, you would say, let's get a tradesperson in to fix it, you know. But the tradespeople are trained in various things, electricians, plumbers, people like that. So you'd probably get a plumber in because that's what they're trained in. Therapy is very similar. Therapy is an overarching term for many therapists who are trained in different modes of therapy. So you've got the archetypal therapist of being psychodynamic, lie on my sofa, let's do thought association, and you know, realize that how much your mother hates you. Then you've got person-centered humanistic, which is about letting the client lead and trusting in their ability to self-actualize. Then you've got cognitive behavioral therapy, which is where the chapter doing driving exposures. So cognitive behavioral therapists will do this. You know, people who really subscribe to cognitive behavioral therapy, Becky and stuff, they'll do the thing with you, you know, and I think that's beautiful. And there is a chapter where one of my clients called Zara has crippling driving anxiety. And so on session 3, I'm like, well, we're not going to overcome driving anxiety sat in here, are we? So we go, we go sit in the car. I'm obviously terrified, and you can hear my thoughts going off, but go with it. And that's a very eventful chapter. I'm not going to let you know what happens, but it was very eventful.
It's
And
very eventful. Lots of plot happens.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, therapists use different modalities, and I think everyone needs to know this. All my friends and family, they just assume you see a therapist and they fix your problems. No, and what type of therapist do you want to go to? See, I love cognitive behavioral therapy. I'm trained in it. I'm also trained in humanistic therapy, and I steal things and add to my therapist toolkit from other modalities. Um, and it's like, as a therapist, and again, you can read this in the book, I'm having a debate in my head going, I wonder which modality would be the best here. Now, cognitive behavioral therapy and exposure therapy is great for things like phobias, anxiety disorders, and depression sometimes, and things like that. Brilliant. But for grief, I would say it's rubbish. If you're grieving, a compassionate, empathetic space for you to process emotions is beautiful for that. Writing letters is a very kind of humanistic approach. It's a very Gestalt approach from Gestalt, and kind of taking things from that and getting in touch with parts of yourself. And yeah, that's what I do as an integrative therapist. I also write, and I'm a real therapy snob when I start writing about why being an integrative therapist is better than being a purist, which it's very tongue in cheek, but there we go. I wanted to make people laugh. But yeah, it's educating people about modalities because most people don't know about it. They just think therapist, they're clever, they'll help me. And sometimes modalities don't match up.
Right. And there's an interesting thing that happens in therapy, of course, where particularly when you start doing it, where as the patient, you wonder why the therapist isn't having any opinions, isn't making any suggestions. And obviously, I think the idea here is like the best teacher doesn't give you the answer. He simply sprinkles the breadcrumbs and leads you and enables you to come to the answer. But I guess I wonder, from your point of view, do you ever have to, or how often do you have to curb your instinct either to applaud someone's recent act or criticize someone's recent act or give them a practical suggestion?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Henry. Yeah, it's about your therapy style. I'm a huge advocate for psychoeducation. I think psychoeducation should be in schools, particularly around the brain, the anxious response. I was once very ill with anxiety, crippling OCD, panic disorder, health anxiety, didn't leave the house for a year. The biggest thing that helped me was someone teaching me what my brain was doing, because I just thought I was going crazy. I just thought I was crazy. I've lost it. I've had a nervous breakdown. I'm never going to be the same again. And I was given all sorts of drugs and weird things. No one knew what was going on until I accessed the teachings of, well, someone was basically saying, this is what's happening in your body. Your amygdala is misfiring. That's why you feel on edge all the time. That's why you're scanning yourself all the time. That's why you're having panic attacks. That's why your thoughts always scream, what if this bad thing happens? And I didn't realize that my behavior and unresolved issues was keeping me in this cycle. Knowing that empowered me to start doing the things to feel better. And so in my approach as a therapist, I like to educate, first of all, what's going on, because I think that's half the battle. It's a very purist approach as a person-centered humanistic Carl Rogers therapist, one of my heroes, by the way, but Carl Rogers style therapist, who they believe that the client has all the answers. But actually, no. I mean, I had undiagnosed obsessive compulsive disorder. I wasn't going to come to that conclusion myself. Someone that's actually a therapist sat down and was like, do you do this? Does this happen? Do you have these thoughts? I was like, yes, that's me. They're like, yeah, you've got OCD. I was like, what's that? And then they told me about OCD. And then I felt less alone. I was like, oh, so it's not just me going crazy. They're like, no, absolutely not. Let me tell you more about OCD and what we can do. Did I have to do the hard work myself and get the credit for it? Yes, absolutely. And yes, a lot of the job is leaving the breadcrumbs because the client needs to leave feeling like they've got the credit. If the client leaves and thinks, oh, thanks to Josh, I'm okay, that's okay in the short term, but not really in the long term. You've got to leave therapy believing that you're the one that's, I feel empowered enough to look after myself and then use therapy again if I need it. We don't want to start fostering reliance on people. So yeah, there's that teaching. I love psychoeducation. I used to be a teacher myself. I used to be a teacher in the UK, we call them pupil referral units. So children who with behavioral difficulties who can't access mainstream education. And I loved being a teacher, and I loved psychology and working in therapy. So psychoeducation is perfect for me. And that's what I do on my social media channels and things. And in this book, it's crammed full of psychoeducation. Little bits though, so you're not overwhelmed. It's like, oh, yeah. And I think I definitely incorporate that into my practice.
Well, yeah, and so clearly your own experiences with anxiety have helped you to become a really good therapist. Do you feel like a person who does not have a background of disorders of any kind, would that therapist be at a disadvantage?
Oh, another one, Henry. Great question. It's the fun.
Trying to make you think.
These are great. I like this. It's better than the radio interviews I have. They're like, "Got any tips for anxiety?" I was like, "Oh God, here we go."
Right, and
making me use my brain.
We'll ask you who your famous actress client is, right?
Oh,
at the top of the show.
The British press are very famous for being intrusive, and I've had that about 50 times. And like, no. Yeah. So therapists can use their previous experience as an advantage sometimes, but also it works as a disadvantage. And so I don't think it's mandatory to be a good therapist. Some of the best anxiety disorder therapists I know haven't had an anxiety disorder, but they've put in the work to understand what it's like. They've enveloped themselves in the phenomenology of someone having panic attacks and doing that, and reading all the theory, and particularly from the books by Sally Winston and more heroes of mine over on that side of the pond. And not necessarily. I can use it and do use it to my advantage, because it seems to foster trust. When I'm open about my own vulnerabilities, people feel a bit more confident to approach me because I'm not pretending I know it all and I'm fixed in this and that. But I am saying, listen, I've been through this, and my experience is not your experience, but I can relate, and that really helps me, and it helps me as on a public platform too. But there is a downside. So if just because you've been through something doesn't necessarily make you more equipped. So in the book, we talk about the inner voices. One is called trigger, and sometimes it can trigger evocative, consuming feelings in you when a client brings up something from your personal life that you can relate to. In this book, grief is a trigger for me. So when someone mentions grief or they've lost someone, my internal body kind of it shudders. It's like, oof. And it's difficult. I start to go into my own head. I'm like, no, bring it back out. And I talk about the conversation and with all these voices in my head go, no, come back here. No, but I want to go here. No, come here now. And I come back to the room again. But yeah, sometimes it's a disadvantage. I've been through grief, so actually it's quite challenging. Or you've got to be careful that you don't make the client's experience about you, and you've got to use your professional training and professional boundaries and skills to take yourself out of your head. So yeah, it's a great question, because yes, it can help me, but for some therapists, it might not be helpful either. It's not mandatory to make. It doesn't make you a better therapist than a therapist who's put the work in and the effort to train.
Right.
Yeah.
One of the fascinating aspects of your profession is this idea that there's almost a built-in obsolescence factor, which is to say, you as a therapist are successful when the patient no longer needs to see you. So it's sort of which, as a business model, if you were a business person, someone would say, "Wait, no, you want people to have problems." So yeah, can you talk a little bit about either that tension or this idea of, when do you know it's time to terminate? When is it time for someone to stop seeing you?
It's something that you address every few sessions with a client. I work short to medium term with clients. That's just my choice as a therapist. So I remind people, and that's my choice because I specify in anxiety disorders as well. And that's just my style. Now I have therapy colleagues who'll do long term. I spoke to someone before who said they've been with a therapist for 8 years, and that's great. It depends what you go for. Because my niche is working with anxiety disorders, I used to work long term, but I found that people were more willing to step into the unknown and the uncertain and the scariness, knowing that therapy was going to end. Whereas I think previously I've struggled with I'll just do it next week. I'll just do it next week because I can keep talking to Josh and this and that. But the way I work is it's time limited. Don't get me wrong. I'm not talking like 3 sessions. Sometimes it can go on for, 6 months to a year. And sometimes it's very short term. It depends what people want. And so, but in therapy, we always check back in every few sessions and look at what we want to get from therapy. One of my most common questions I ask is, "What's next? What would you like to use therapy for?" Some people are like, "I just need a space to talk and rant. My life is hell at the moment. My relationship's in tatters. My boss is an ass. I'm not feeling very well. I'm grieving someone, and I just want to rant." Great. It's welcome here. Whereas some people are like, "I've got to go on holiday in 2 weeks and I'm scared. I can't even get on the highway. Never mind get on a plane." I'm like, "Okay, well, let's work on that." And it's a constant readdressing. I think if I'm being honest, as a therapist, I'm scared. I'm probably scared of the long-term therapy thing because I wouldn't want to stop seeing a client if I've seen them for years because it would be hurtful for both. I think it's part of my professional boundaries to be like, I think I'm protecting myself a little bit there as well. But that's just how I work. Therapists are different. There are some therapists that do one session therapy. It's this new thing that's happening. Training in one session therapy, which I think I find it fascinating. I don't think I don't know what you do in that therapy, but I kind of see it as like a really helpful chat that maybe, I don't know, encourages you to seek further therapy. I don't know. But yeah, it's a difficult one. Endings are difficult. You never really train because everyone's unique and every relationship is unique, particularly between therapist and client. So, but it seems to constantly readdressing and never letting someone feel like they're abandoned or left is integral as you become more experienced as a therapist.
Yeah, no. Well, I had a therapist who, instead of asking, what do you want from this, or where do you see yourself in a year, or questions like that, she would say, "What's possible?" And that was a nice way, I thought, of keeping me from having my wheels spin, having sort of, grandiose ambitions or unrealistic expectations. Because once you say possible, then it just brings it into this kind of practical realm that I feel much more comfortable with, rather than it's almost like when people say, "Let me tell you a funny story." That's never a fun. I never laugh that, when they tell the story, because you've created this expectation. So yeah, what's possible was very helpful for me.
I like that. Also, and therapy, it's a good cop out as well as a therapist. It's like, back to you, have a Socratic question.
Yes.
Therapists we always have these list of cop outs, like, so you sit there and you look very wise and be like, "But how do you feel about that?"
Yeah.
Because I don't have an answer. So
Yeah,
back to you.
exactly. Deflect.
Deflect, yeah.
Um, well, before we switch over to some audience questions, I guess the one other thing I would love to know is, if you weren't a therapist, what would you be doing for work?
Ideally, hypothetically, or
What's
uh,
possible, Josh?
oh, well, what's possible? I mean, I
Yeah.
couldn't be a professional football player. My knees don't work. But oh, I don't. I'd probably. Well, I was a teacher. I may still. No, I actually don't think I would be a teacher. I think I'd have gone into writing in some way. I
Yeah.
love plot, and I hope you enjoyed the plot of And How Does It Make You Feel, because I take inspiration from great books and TV in particular. Well written plot, I love,
Yeah,
and
no, that's absolutely, that's what's great. And as you say, because we're getting information in chunks that we keep in the book, Josh doesn't do all of patient Zara or patient Daphne's story all at once. You get like an episode, maybe a couple of sessions, then we go to another patient, and yes, it creates this momentum of narrative.
Thanks, Henry. Yeah.
So let us look here at, so here's a question from someone in the audience. Is the intent of therapy to cure or to teach people how to cope, or both?
Good question. I never use the word cure because I don't believe people are broken. That's something I repeat in the book. I don't see, and therapists, well, particularly in my line of training, don't see people as ill as such. I don't. And there's a bit in the book where actually one of the clients, Zara, is like, "I'm ill, I'm broken, can you fix me? I want to get rid of this panic disorder." And I say, quite self-righteously and virtuously, "I don't believe you are broken, Zara. I don't believe you are ill." And then Zara says, "Well, actually, panic disorder is in the DSM-5, so I kind of am." And I'm like, "Oh, damn it." No, it's to facilitate what I'm trying to do, which is offer a space that is unconditional, empathy, um, and congruence, which means authenticity. If I offer that in my therapy room, along with my other training, my psychoeducation, the aim is to allow the client and enable the client to make as much progress as they want. Some people come to therapy for different reasons, and I don't see things through a diagnostic lens. Don't get me wrong, that there are a few kind of indicators that you look out for. If a client is stopped having panic attacks and stopped avoiding things and they're managing to sleep, and then you sit there as a therapist, go, yeah, you're making progress. That's great. But in general, no, it's not I never think I want to fix this person. It's more allow them to kind of actualize in themselves. um, that's the way I see it, definitely.
Great. Here's another one from the audience. Do you have any tips for finding the right therapist?
Yeah, good question. So I would sit and ask yourself, what would I like to get from therapy? It's difficult because you're not expected to go off to the library and read about every therapeutic modality to see if it matches up, because one, that's boring, and two, you shouldn't have to. A good way to see if something is a match, and I've done this, I still see a therapist now, is talk to each therapist and ask them how they work as a therapist. So for me, it was essential someone was educated about OCD and neurodivergence, because I needed someone who knew who was aware of that and informed, because I knew that it would be very challenging if the therapist didn't know about that. And then I'd ask what they were trained in and how they work. And a good therapist will be happy to just tell you. They'd be like, "Oh, okay, well, I predominantly use CBT, but then I also use transactional analysis, which means we look at your adult state, your inner child state, your inner parent state." One might be an attachment relationship therapist, but it comes from what you want from therapy. Um, and it's okay to ring around and ask them. I do. I ring them up and be like, but try before you buy. Not necessarily, but a good therapist will take 5-10 minutes out and say, well, this is how I work, and if you're interested, book in for a session.
And how do you think patients how do you know that it's a good fit? Because obviously the therapeutic process is going to involve a certain amount of pain. So how much pain is too much pain?
Um, it it depends if if you're struggling with extra maybe needs. For some people, uh, as a general rule, I don't think there is too much pain, but you take things slowly. But if you're someone who has a mental health condition that's exacerbated by a lot at once, maybe you struggle with bipolar or um, um, paranoid schizophrenia and things like that, where a lot of stimulus at once probably isn't recommended. But if you were to take it as a general rule of just exploring pain, you can do it, take it at your own pace and realize you're more capable than you think. I'm talking as a client now, and I've had a lot of therapy myself. I had to explore a lot of pain, and I do share some of it in my book, but there's a lot of pain there from traumatic things, and a lot of it, a lot of my pain I was currently having in the book was not addressing it. Unaddressed pain and issues create more pain in the long run than the acute kind of, I'm going to be brave and courageous now and face it. I'm going to give myself a pat on the back, and then I'm going to take that off. It's going to less weight on my shoulders. I always use the jug analogy, pour a bit out of my jug at a time. You don't have to cram it into one session, take a little bit at a time. I don't think there's too much pain. I think, and I find that if you take it slow, go easy on yourself, and address these, whatever you want to talk about, with a therapist that you get along with and there's a good relationship, you'll find that, yeah, you're more capable than you think.
Another question from the audience is why do therapists need to themselves see therapists?
That's a good question. I see a therapist like I go to the gym. I'm happy, I'm content. But one of the biggest misconceptions of therapy is that you go when you feel rock bottom. No, I go preventatively. I've got like this big book launch. It's out. This book is out in the US. So you guys now came out yesterday. That's a lot to take on. Then I've got stuff going on at home, and then I've got work and got my own clients, and I've got loads of things going on here. I'm stressed, and okay, I could let that snowball and build up, or I can just have a nice kind of way to process it at therapy. I have OCD and various things as well, neurodivergent. So it's nice to keep an eye on that to maintain feeling good, or when I don't feel good, to make sure that's okay. I can do that to stay on top of things. I think that kind of question revolves around this conception that, well, if you're a therapist, why are you still in therapy? You're not fixed yet? No, I'm very happy. I think there's this misconception that therapy is something that you're in when you're not well, when you're not doing things, when you're not capable. I'm very capable. I can do these things, and that's something I'd like to change and address, because yeah, the myth is you go to therapy when you're rock bottom. But it's interesting because you wouldn't say to a dentist, "You're a dentist. Why are you seeing a dentist?" It's like, no, because sometimes you have to. Interestingly, though, your teeth are taken more seriously than your entire brain and mental health and wellness. So yeah, I'm going to the dentist to see my teeth, get my teeth sorted. I'm going to the therapist to literally look after the thing that runs this thing. And I genuinely see it like that now, and I try to model that for others.
Another audience question.
These are great questions, by the way. Really good
They are
questions.
really
Yeah.
good. This one is interesting to me. Someone wonders what you think of the telephone in therapy, and that's interesting to me because during the pandemic, when people couldn't meet with their therapists, of course, you were doing phone or FaceTime sessions, and it was really interesting to me how much freer I felt telling. If I had something difficult to relate, it was so much easier to do it over the phone. But by the same token, I wondered if it had the same weight or valence as having to unburden that same thing face to face with someone. What are your views?
Great question. I've done a lot of telephone counseling for people. It's what works for you. For some people, and I've had this personally as a client as well, just telling someone over the phone without the added kind of weight of someone looking at you do that can be helpful. Depends. It just what works for you. I've had beautiful moments in this therapy room where you're sharing the space with someone, but I've also had some beautiful moments using telephone counseling where people just feel comfortable. They'll sit in their room, in their safe space, where they feel empowered and can talk about difficult things, knowing that they can put the phone down and self-soothe or look after themselves, or they don't have to leave the therapy room and travel 4 miles home in the car feeling vulnerable. So it has its ups and downs. Sometimes it can work, but it depends what you're comfortable accessing therapy with. Some people aren't comfortable with sitting face to face, and that's okay, particularly if you have autism, and some people with autism don't like it's too intense, and they can't access their feelings because they're too anxious because they're being stared at, whereas some people love that. Like, there's a real human connection here. Obviously, as an anxiety disorder therapist, and talk about exposure therapy in the book, I've done loads of telephone sessions. So people going to the shopping mall who are agoraphobic, agoraphobic, as you say over there. It's like, right, put me in your ear, let's go. Let's go walk into the shopping mall. If I live far away and I can't join you, I'll join you in your ear, and I'll annoy you and that's been really powerful for people. So it depends. There's no one size fits all. Yes, it's nice. It's very Hollywood, isn't it, when you see the therapist sitting there and the client, and there's a huge shared epiphany and everything's wonderful. But sometimes therapy can be very unconventional. It depends. Honestly, it's about the connection. But I've seen it work in many ways.
This isn't really a question, but I think it's food for thought. I've known a few people who've been in therapy for several years, mostly with the same issues, and never improve. It just seems that they like discussing their problems without going anywhere.
I mean, that can happen. If you look at it through an optimist lens, it could be maybe they are just keeping this problem, that's something that's very manageable for them. It's interesting because as an anxiety disorder therapist, my brain went, maybe they have OCD. One of the most misunderstood conditions that people have, it's very common, is obsessive compulsive disorder, where I've got to watch out for clients who constantly seek reassurance because that becomes a compulsion. Lots of people think OCD is washing your hands or being tidy. No, actually, a lot of it's just mental and cognitive, particularly in the imagination. And so sometimes when people end up in a cycle, they can go because they are compulsively seeking that reassurance to make themselves feel better. Some people might just not be ready to put in the work. Sometimes it's just bad therapy where the therapist needs to address why they're not making progress as such, whatever that definition of progress is. I wish I could tell you all therapists are great. They're not. it's up to you to decide whether I'm a good one or not if you read the book. But I'm not going to get on my soapbox here. But yeah, I mean, there's reasons for it. I still take issues to therapy now that come up now and then, and that's okay. I'll always talk about grief. I'll always talk about losing loved ones and what I've been through. Not endlessly, but I think, like sometimes if things bubble up to the surface and I'll be like, you know what? It's the anniversary of that person and I can feel I'm tense, so I'd like to talk about it again. But if it's becoming cyclical and you feel like you're going nowhere, it's up to the therapist to be taking that to supervision, going, what can I do to best help this client here? Am I the right person to help this client here? So yeah, without knowing a bit more, I can't really comment, but that's just a bit of an overview of maybe why this person is going around on the hamster wheel.
Yeah. Here's another. Does every statement in a therapeutic session matter? I am aware that word choice, pauses, demonstrated emotion are part of the equation, but is every word in a 60-minute session part of the analysis?
No, no, don't be. It's not that. And also, the human brain can't remember all that. And a good therapist is listening and they will identify nuance. You know, people who come to therapy, particularly who are anxious for the first time, will come in and just talk nonsense because they're anxious. I'm not analyzing that. I'm just allowing them to feel comfortable. Sometimes we'll just talk about, I don't know, I'm British, the weather, something that's very normalizing. No, not at all. If there's something intriguing that I find here, I'll say to the client, I'll be very honest, be like, I was interested when you said about that time where you froze in that scenario. If you want to, would you like to explore that together? You don't have to. No, that they're not this omnipotent know-it-all using all this knowledge and theory to kind of analyze you. No. Maybe if it's a psychodynamic therapist, but that's just me being a yeah. No, no, absolutely not. It's just to go with you wherever you want to go. If something comes up repetitive, like that you repeat, the therapist might say, I noticed you mentioned that a few times, what's all that about? No, don't be afraid that the therapist is, you'll just say some silly things. I've said silly things as a client, and the therapist isn't going, no, that's a trope. That's not what's happening there. You needn't worry. And if you don't feel, you can even say that to your therapist. Are you analyzing everything I'm saying? No, not really. Look out for patterns sometimes to help you, but no, there's this. Don't feel like you're under this huge magnifying glass because that isn't going to help anyone.
Right. Here's another. This is kind of a huge question, but you can take a whack at it. What are ways to not let anxiety impede the good work you're trying to do in your job and relationships?
You don't let anxiety impede by taking it with you. When you resist anxiety, it becomes bigger. You teach the brain that it's something to be feared itself. So if you're worried that your anxiety will get bigger, then that worry reinforces to the brain, the amygdala, that anxiety itself is something to be feared and it's big and important. Take it with you because you can function with anxiety. This is what people don't understand. They think when I'm anxious, I'm incapable. Don't get me wrong, it's consuming. I'm someone who's had diagnosed various anxiety disorders in the past. I know how cumbersome it can feel, to put it lightly. But why I realized that I got my life back when I realized, just come with me. I don't care if you're with me or not. I'm not going to be prejudiced towards you. I'm not weak because I have anxiety. I realize that you shout louder and feel more intense when I'm stressed and when I'm being very self-critical. Anxiety loves self-criticism. You keep trying to hide it. If you're ashamed of it, it loves it. So if you're like, yeah, whatever, I always use the analogy, you can come for the ride, but you're sitting in the back because I'm up front and you're not messing with the radio and doing all that stuff. I'm driving the car. My radio, you can just talk nonsense in the back. I don't care. But you can come with me. They're the rules. That's a very small analogy of what how I did it, but don't see it as something that you fix or conquer. The paradox of that is that when you start behaving in a way where anxiety isn't important, you then suddenly become less anxious because the brain wires itself. It's very neuroplastic, and it'll just be like, oh, I haven't got that fear of fear anymore. And that's something that I love to do with my clients. You're more capable than you think. So thank you. It's so helpful to treat anxiety that way. Definitely. Oh, I've been there. Been there. I mean, this is what I do on my social media and stuff. I teach people correct psychoeducation about anxiety, as opposed to I must fight it today. Nope, because it's going to be a waste of time. Yeah.
And you are such a great advertisement for your own philosophy and methodology, because given that your nickname is Anxiety Josh, you are the most placid, anxious person I've ever met. So
I'm just
good on
lazy.
you.
I'm just lazy. I'm so lazy, I can't be bothered to show you how anxious I am.
Oh, that's what it is. Oh, well, that's a great coping technique.
I'm motivated by laziness. I am anxious, but I don't want to show Henry today.
Gotcha.
No, no,
Great.
it's fine. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Omar, do you want to come back on? Because it looks like we're coming to the close of our program. There he is. Your sound is off.
Hello. Yeah, we're reaching the end. Thank you so much, Josh and Henry. This has been amazing. Um, I am a big proponent of therapy myself, so I was very excited to have Josh here. And I concur with Henry that you're very placid. Um, although
Thank you very much.
I've been told the same, and I also deal with a lot of anxiety. So I feel you. I'll say I'm completely anxious, and people say, "Wow, well, I would never have thought that." Um, uh, Great. So yeah, so we'll close out for today. And yes, I was going to put in the chat as just folks can visit us for more events. Please buy Josh's book. And how
There
does
it
it
is.
make you
Nice
feel?
hardback.
Yes. Look how beautiful that book is.
Yeah, I'm very happy with it. Lovely. Yeah. US specific colors as well. I like this version as well. I
Yes.
like this one. It's a bit bigger than the UK version. And
And once you read that one, read Josh's other books. Visit the, listen to the podcast, visit his website, put it in the chat. Go to Instagram, his Instagram.
yeah, if you're someone who struggles with anxiety, highly recommend a podcast. Free resource. My co-host is from New York, so it's very transatlantic podcast. So we like to take the mickey out of each other, and he's a previous sufferer too. If you want to know more about the world about therapy, get this on, and yeah, you will be very. There's a lot of juicy stuff in this and loads of helpful stuff, and I really hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, get a copy for your therapist, and then when they get it, they'll ask you, how does it make you feel to give me this book? That's something my therapist would do. So all right, everyone. Thank you so much. Thanks again, Josh. Thanks again,
Thanks.
Henry.
Thanks, you guys.
We'll see
Thank
you
you.
very soon. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.